Taipei, metropolis and capital of Taiwan. The abandoned UFO village is said to be located just an hour outside the city. Our editor Linda Kerb is on the road with translator Sean Kaiteri. Sean lives in Taiwan and he too has heard about this strange lost place. It's said to be in Wanli, a coastal town in the north of the island.
Doesn't look very lost here.
No, it's not that lost.
Only a few meters further on, at the edge of the city, the area is suddenly deserted. On a hill, we discover the first UFO house.
This looks like it's from an old science fiction movie.
Not only UFOs, but also futuristic angular buildings are standing here. There seems to be a whole village, run down, abandoned, and decaying. In many places, we find signs of past life. People actually used to live here. So why did they leave this place? Linda and Sean go looking for clues in one of the UFO houses.
Wow, the floor has fallen through. There's a huge hole down there.
Be careful when you go inside, there's no floor.
We still want to risk a look inside. At least through the locked door.
There are still bar stools there.
Was this an apartment? Or a pub? What happened here that turned it into a lost place? The village must have been empty for many years, considering how weathered everything looks. Our search for clues continues. The neighbouring UFO is more easily accessible and amazingly well preserved.
There's the window open, shall we try and get through that?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Can we find any clues in here as to why and when the residents left their homes?
The floor feels really weak.
The weather has also left its mark on the houses. The kitchen and the whole design is very retro and reminds us of the 1970s. Maybe this was supposed to be an expensive holiday resort by the sea. Next to the living area, Linda and Sean discover a former bedroom. Signs of life everywhere.
Even though there are still bed sheets and all kinds of cushions lying around, I don't think they had to leave in such a hurry, because the cupboards have been emptied. There's nothing left in the cupboards at all.
But what has to happen for someone to leave a place like this? Translator Sean, who's been living in the region for 15 years, has an idea.
To take a guess, it'd have to be something to do with the weather. Winter time, it's kind of cold, and heating this place would not be easy. And then summertime, it's super hot. It'd just be like living in a glass house. It's not brick. This stuff just going to absorb heat like nothing else.
Sean's assumption sounds plausible. In summer, thermometers in Wanli can hit the 40-degree mark. The outside walls and the whole bathroom seem to be made of plastic, not a good insulator. We look for clues as to how long this house has been abandoned.
A newspaper.
Can you see a date on that?
Maybe. Okay, March the 5th, 91, so maybe 15 years ago?
91?
91, well, in Taiwan years, 91.
Taiwan has a different calendar than we do. The so-called Mingguo calendar starts with the foundation of the country in 1912. So the last sign of life in the UFO house is 14 years old.
So if you're in the kitchen, I'm feeling kind of hungry, yeah?
But What would you like to have for dinner, darling?
Steak and fries, please.
But the cupboards are empty, and there are only a few scraps stuck in the pot. So, no lunch for Sean. Something must have happened here 14 years ago to make the inhabitants leave the place. We decide to ask at the neighbouring hotel. Maybe someone there knows something about the lost place or its residents. Mrs. Chen, a member of the hotel staff, takes Linda and Sean to the roof terrace overlooking the UFO village. Has she heard anything about the history of this abandoned village?
A famous businessman built the village. He had a toothpaste and a soda factory. He built the village with a dream that people would come here.
What was it supposed to be? So why did he build this?
People were supposed to rent the houses for their holidays, but also buy them. But for most tenants, it was too hot and far too uncomfortable in summer. So they just didn't come anymore.
The UFO village seems to be a case of bad planning. Built in the early 1970s and abandoned bit by bit at the end of the 1970s. A holiday village by the sea was the vision of businessman Mr. Su Ming. It was supposed to be a holiday resort for the rich and beautiful. In the 1970s, the daily rent was supposed to have cost 135 euros. Intended as a place of joy and life. Today, his vision is a lost place. But not only the weather is said to be responsible for all this. Behind the UFO village, we discover an overgrown cemetery. Taiwanese people are extremely superstitious, and they worship their ancestors. The general belief is that if a grave is not cared for, the spirits rise up again. Superstition. One of the reasons why people no longer wanted to live here. It even keeps many Taiwanese from going into the sea at certain times of the year.
Have a ghost month in the middle of summer where you cannot go near the water, you can't go near the beach. It's a time they believe the gates of hell have opened and all the ghosts are wandering the earth, especially all the ocean ghosts. People have died in shipwrecks, throughout history. So the worst place to go is in the water. So you don't go to the beach, you don't go swimming.
July, the hottest time of the year, is Ghost Month, when Taiwanese people choose to avoid their beaches. Not the best conditions for a holiday resort. Between the ruins, Linda and Sean suddenly discover a house that seems to be well preserved and knock on the beach house door. Who'd have thought it?
Can we come inside and have a look? Oh wow.
Mr. Tao is a friendly host. He even turns on the heating for us. My house is very simple but cozy. I only have one room here and a small bathroom in the back. Visitors rarely stray to Mr. Tao. Maybe that's why he proudly shows us his little home with its original 1970s bathroom. The bathrooms are made of fiberglass, as are all the houses. The idea was to make everything as if from one piece. Mr. Tao has lived in Wanli for 30 years. He's been living in the UFO village for 6 years, rent-free, and is tolerated here by the authorities. I love the beach and the sea and all kinds of water sports. Living here is wonderful and very comfortable for me. In summer, Mr. Tao tells us, he rents out jet skis in the neighbouring hotel. In winter, he enjoys his free time here. The hot and rainy weather doesn't bother him. Air conditioning and dehumidifiers keep his house cozy. But Mr. Tao does seem to have barricaded himself in. It's almost as if he doesn't want to see the run-down lost place.
当时那个整个园区有在整理。
30 years ago, residents tried to keep their houses in order. They had nice, big, clean windows. It was generally very clean, but it was never quite perfect. Since the village was built, there were always problems. There was always something broken. And then deterioration set in, caused by the weather, which destroyed the place more and more. The inhabitants decided not to live here anymore and left their houses in an uninhabitable condition. And then, after 2 hours, Mr. Tao reveals, to our great surprise, that he's not the only resident living in the ruins. His neighbours, an elderly couple, are good friends of his. Mr. Tao even has a key to their house, which is monitored by CCTV.
So it's what I call a typhoon door, right?
A door that protects the house from the stormy sea.
Oh, wow.
What we see here, between all the abandoned and destroyed houses, is surprising. Mr. Tao's neighbour has built himself a luxury house, with expensive model planes, lots of high-tech, and a massage chair. All houses directly on the beach have such a cellar. Those further back don't. Actually, it should be a storage room, but my neighbour has made it into a comfortable living room. Mr. Tao tells us that the owner is a rich businessman who used to work in Hong Kong. He's been living in the UFO village with his wife for 15 years. Very secluded. The best thing about his kitchen here is the view. Whatever the reason why this man lives here in such a lost place, he's put a lot of money into his house. So far, he's had to spend over 80,000 euros on storm damage alone. In the past, there have often been problems with typhoons here. Water, sand, everything came in here and destroyed everything. My neighbour had to completely rebuild his living room. Originally, there were 93 houses in the UFO village. Today, only 2 are still inhabited. I think the inconvenience with the weather was the reason why most people left this place. But it's these very inconveniences that have a charm of their own for Mr. Tao. He likes the peace and quiet here. The peace and quiet between all the destroyed houses and the sea. I don't look at the mainland. I don't look there. I'm looking towards the sea and it's perfect. Behind Mr. Tao's house are the final remains of a dream. Of a man and his vision to build a happy holiday village out of UFOs. Today, a unique lost place, which has become the home of loners and recluses.